The reason we're here is to talk about 253, why I think it's a problem, and then to have a good discussion about it. But Linda will go through the budget exact numbers. You know, as I've said many times, but it's comfortable for me to say it again and again, in Missouri, public education is a value. It's not a political position. Okay? And today, the calling of people that are involved in public education is the highest calling for the economic future of our state, and quite frankly, our country, that you can possibly have. As I said in my State of the State address this year, education, public education, is the #1 economic development tool we have. I sit across the table from lots of folks that talk about investing or growing in our state. And each time that I do those meetings, the most important focus is about the workforce, a trained workforce to win the future. And quite frankly, the competition for the future in jobs and capacity is a worldwide competition, not just between Missouri and Kansas, or between us and this state, Texas, whatever it is down there. Just don't get me started about it. I'm not exactly sure why my good friend from the Lone Star State wants to come to Missouri and talk about why businesses ought to move to Texas, but if he wants to have that debate, I am certainly ready to have it, since they have higher sales tax rates than us, higher property tax rates than us, worse graduation rates in high school, worse health ratios than we do. I will welcome him here with open arms to help us in our debate about how Missouri wants to be Missouri, not Texas. But that's neither here nor there. I guess it is kind of, but anyway. Over the last 4.5 years, we have moved through some challenging economic times. And it's interesting as we look at House Bill 253, how we reacted to those and how other states reacted. You know, other states raised taxes. 40 states raised taxes between 2009 and 2011. Other states cut education funding. 25 states have cut funding for schools by more than 5% over the last 4 years. Here in Missouri, we did things much differently. We balanced the budget each year without reaching further into the pockets of taxpayers or gutting the funding for schools. In fact, I cut taxes, I signed bills to cut taxes 4 times in my first term as governor. But each one of those was focused on being a targeted tax cut designed to create jobs and opportunity in the state of Missouri. Those 4 tax cuts, we did a small business deduction in the middle of the recession to give confidence. We worked to get rid of the franchise tax, a double taxation on businesses that existed before. We put specific tax policies in place to help the manufacturing sector, and because of that, we've had over $1.5 billion invested here by Ford and GM and other parts producers, and thousands of jobs headed our way. And then the fourth of those tax cuts was to phase out our taxation on the pensions of military retirees, especially folks on those that fought in Afghanistan and Iraq. We knew that as the military downsides and these folks finished their 5, 10, 15, or 20 years, that we would have an opportunity to garner that workforce to our state, and we wanted to send a clear signal. So each one of those times was focused directly, and because of that program, the Show Me Heroes program, over 4,500 veterans that served in Afghanistan and Iraq are working today in Missouri at jobs that have been created in the Show Me state directly under that program. And the other thing, we focused on education, and because of that, since 2009, in K through 12, our math scores are up, our reading scores are up, the number of young adults with college degrees are up, the number of folks going to college is up, our graduation rate is up. And because of all of that, our economy is beginning to move forward. We've been below the national average in unemployment for 47 straight months. We're adding jobs. Things are moving forward. Through some very lean years, we've had to make some very tough choices. And I thank Dr. Pano for the choices he's had to make here at this university. Difficult budgets have meant that choices had to be made, and he and the board and others made those choices. But we all know that nothing will have a greater impact on the future and on the future of the state than the commitment that we make now to education. But in my opinion, folks, right now, one reckless experiment bankrolled by one very wealthy individual could undermine our ability to make these important investments now and for years to come, and I'm talking about House Bill 253. As I explained in my veto message, there are many problems with this bill. I mean, 2 come to light on the end that people missed. Okay, I've served in the legislature. I know what it's like a little bit. The last few weeks of the legislature, a lot of stuff comes across your desk. It's very difficult to get a grip on all of it. The story I tell, and they made 2 really significant mistakes in this bill. One was to reinstate the tax on prescription drugs. That's a $200 million tax increase for Missourians that get prescription medication. And the other one was to get rid of the exemption, thus reinstate the tax on school textbooks for college kids. Boy, there's an economic development plan. Let's make sure that prescription drugs are more expensive and college is more expensive. Both of those were a mistake. I don't think folks saw them as they came through. And as I said before, mistakes get made. I remember like yesterday, I was arguing my first case at the state Supreme Court after I was Attorney General. And the court was just pounding on me about how this statute that I was trying to defend in the court was inartfully written and, quite frankly, not really understandable. And finally, after about third question, the Chief Justice leaned over and said, "General Nixon, who wrote this monstrosity?" And I said, "Well, I was a state senator that wrote it, but other than that, it's okay." The point I make here is that mistakes get made. And when you make mistakes like this to raise taxes, what you don't do is say, here's what we do, and what quite frankly, the Speaker and some of his folks are saying. They're saying the solution to this is vote to override the governor, and here's what we'll do. We'll come back next year, and we'll take care of you. I just want to tell you, folks, I've been around for now 28 years. If your government tells you, I'm going to raise your taxes, but trust me, I'll come back later and take care of you, be very skeptical, okay? It's a lot easier just to sustain this veto, come back next year, move forward without this sort of mistakes in there. But the main focus I want to talk about tonight is what the fiscal impact of this bill would be. The impact on our public schools, like those right here in Kirksville, would be the most devastating. With a price tag of more than $800 million annually, House Bill 253 would drain millions of dollars from our public school districts each and every year. It's important to put that number in context, okay? That's the equivalent of cutting all the support for our public colleges and universities, closing every one of our prisons, or shutting down the entire Department of Mental Health. Now, Linda and Chris are going to go through the numbers, but even if you accept the General Assembly's own assumptions, the bill would reduce funding for our K-12 classrooms by $260 million a year. And right here in Kirksville, schools could see a reduction of at least $667,000 a year and up to $1.1 million this year. These are cuts your schools, your staff, and your students don't deserve and, quite frankly, can't afford. Second, this bill's costs are so staggering, its provisions so flawed, that they even caught the attention of leading independent credit rating agencies. Now, I'm going to explain something here that some might think is complicated, but we're in Missouri, not Texas. I can talk about complicated stuff without people getting blown away here, okay? We're what's called a AAA state. That's the highest credit rating you could have. All three rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, and Standard & Poor's, give us that highest ranking. And they've done so for 46 years. It's not about being a Democrat or a Republican. It's about the fact that fiscal discipline is something that we practice. We get our budgets done on time. We keep them balanced. We make the necessary restrictions. We do the things that you have to do to move it forward. The problem we have here is we recently refinanced a small tranche of bonds. We do that all the time because as interest rates drop, we can get additional dollars. When we did that, after the legislative session was over, all three rating agencies said to us that if you are overridden, Governor, on 253, because of the financial uncertainties, we're going to have to come back and review your budget, your rating status, and potentially downgrade your state. Now, that has a horrific effect on everybody. Not only does it make every dollar that schools get more expensive, it makes our credit rating worse, it makes it a worse place to invest. It is just very bad. And so it's extremely important that we keep this gold standard AAA credit rating. If we don't, it'll increase interest rates on the bonds that districts use to finance school construction or fire districts or others. Now, before I turn it over to the other people, some of you might be wondering why some folks are still so determined to pass this bill. If it's this expensive, somebody is making out pretty good, you know. I'm here to tell you, I don't think it's anybody in this room, okay? It's probably not you, and it's certainly not me, and it's not anybody in this room. The biggest tax breaks in this bill are for something called pass-through business income. That is income reported by S corporations and other types of corporate partnerships like law firms and lobbyists. Now, the legislature conveniently exempted these breaks from their so-called triggers. Chris will explain that in a minute. So even if revenue is plummeting, even during a historic recession, lobbyists and law firms will get a tax break worth $260 million a year. An average family making 48 grand a year, tax cut, when the thing's fully in place and fully engaged, and you get the maximum tax cut you could possibly get on this piece of legislation that's out there to run all these ads on, $6. 2 pairs of socks, depending on the price you pay for socks. I don't know about y'all, but the future of our state and the future of our education system is worth a lot more to me than a couple of pairs of socks. And if we are going to look at things in the tax arena, it ought to be something that helps working people. It ought to be something that is targeted the way the 4 tax cuts I've done. It's targeted to specifically create jobs and get investment in the state, not just help specific pieces like the lawyers and the lobbyists. So here's the quick trade-off. Higher tuition, higher interest rates, larger class sizes, fewer teachers in exchange for what amounts to a couple of pairs of socks. It's not fair, it's not right, and it's certainly not the way to grow our economy. Now, we know the way to continue to improve our schools is by supporting them, not attacking them. But you know something? Not everybody agrees. There is a group of folks out there that think attacking schools is somehow correct. Everybody I appoint to every board or commission that has anything to do with education, the last thing I say to them before they take that appointment is I say, I want you to love education so much that you're willing to improve it, to make it better. Okay? We don't need people attacking public schools or public colleges. We need folks working to make it better. And we have fought these folks before. And you know what? Every time they've attacked public education in a significant way in this state, we've won. But these ideologues are now armed with a new and much more dangerous weapon. House Bill 253 would starve our public schools of the basic support they need to educate our kids now and for years to come, draining billions of dollars away from our schools over the next decade. This attack is unprecedented. You know, I don't mean to talk in front of my good friend Nate Walker here, but I've been around, both of you and I have been around for a long time. And I have never heard somebody run for elective office, run for the state house or the state senate, making a speech in which they say, I promise you these 4 things. I promise you if you elect me, I will raise taxes on prescription drugs. I promise if you elect me, I will make college textbooks more expensive. I promise if you elect me, that I will bring less money back to our school district, okay, from Jeff City. And oh, by the way, if you elect me, I'll make sure that special interests get tax breaks with your dollars. Now, if people made those speeches or wrote letters out and said they were in favor of that, then fine. But you know, you don't get it both ways. You don't get to stand out in your district and make a speech on one side and then come to Jeff City and do the other. And that's why we've, instead of what some folks are doing, we have done what I'm doing right here. I've been traveling the state, meeting openly and publicly. Linda and Chris will brief you in just a second. Then we're going to have an open public dialogue here, question and answer period, to talk about this. This is that important because you know what? You can't be for House Bill 253 and for education. You cannot. It's just not possible because it just will not work. So, earlier this month, the bill sponsor announced that the House would attempt to override my veto regardless of what the numbers were. But I'm just asking everybody to make sure you tell folks that you can support 253 or you can support public education, but you can't do both. I'd also like to thank everybody for all the support we've had. We have had school boards across the state, including the school board right here in Kirksville, and the city council, adopting resolutions calling on the legislature to sustain this veto. 77 school boards have done that. Mayor Detweiler and your team, I thank you for your help. Now, the other side has got a bunch of money. This one guy that's running these ads, he's really, really rich, okay? And you're going to see a lot of that. And the other thing you're going to see, what we're doing right here is called grassroots politics. This is real people in a public forum talking with folks about real issues. What the other side is going to do is something called astroturfing, okay? They are going to fake it like they're out real people. Mr. Walker here and his compatriots in the legislature are going to get hundreds of emails generated by a computer paid for by somebody. They're going to get hundreds of calls generated by somebody who writes a check, and you're going to see ads up there. Hopefully the ads attack me because I got broad shoulders. If the best thing they can do is run ads saying bad things about me, they must not have a very good argument. You know, they must be unwilling to do what we're doing here, stand in a public forum and talk about our side of the issue, and open and take questions from everybody.